Joe, thanks for speaking with us. Radio has exploded in Kenya since the 90s, mid-90s, where we had just the national broadcasters, two radio stations. What has that seen like? What radio stations do you track?
Well, our audience measurement tracks all the radio stations. So from the time we had, 3 radio services, now we have about 163 radio services that are currently on air. And according to the CCK, they have about another 150 applications, right, for frequencies. So it certainly shows that a lot of the potential has been fulfilled, but there is still a lot of potential to come. So we can expect to see a lot more activity happening on radio.
So how do you track who's listening to what station at what time? Because stations rely on this data to be able to sell to advertisers.
We are the sole suppliers for the Kenya Audience Research Foundation. And we provide an audience survey that is countrywide, that is national, and it's done in 2 parts. The first part is an establishment survey, which looks at the general population to understand the viewing patterns, viewing and listening patterns across the country. And then the second part is to track those listening and viewing patterns. And we do this continuously throughout the year, and we provide the data on a quarterly basis with a monthly rolling window.
Right now, on a more general perspective, what do you see as the trends in this industry?
It's interesting because radio is pretty dynamic. Initially, it was quite interesting that the English stations were doing quite well. But then with the inclusion of very strong Swahili stations and strong vernacular stations, we're seeing the vernacular stations being extremely strong. Now, we also track radio from a more regional basis, or looking at it, we're able to break it down into a regional basis. So if you go to places like central Kenya, you have a vernacular station that's doing the best there. You go to the Lake region, you'll find that there's a Luo station or a vernacular station doing the best there. And it's basically around the country we're seeing very strong vernacular radio and very strong engagement. Vernacular radio seems to have the stronger engagement than both Swahili and English.
When you say a station is doing well, that's the opinion of the responders you have on your team who listen to a certain station at a certain time, right? It's not terribly scientific, is it?
I was actually going to say that that's not the extent of it.
Yes.
The first part is you look at the reach. The second part is you look at the amount of time people spend on this particular stations. And the third part is to see the level of engagement. So you have to have a better, when you look at what's happening with the vernacular stations, you find a higher level of engagement, which means that the audiences are engaging more with those stations, and therefore advertising would be much stronger placed in those stations, and advertising that fits the content as well.
So are advertisers looking at or interested in stations with large national audiences or more niche kind of outlets?
Over the years, the level of advertising and media purchase has increased tremendously and become a lot more sophisticated. One of the reasons for that is that we are providing much better data than we were in the beginning. In the beginning, we started off with Nairobi only. Then we went into Nairobi, Mombasa, and Kisumu. Then we started to do 8 regions in the country, which were all just urban. Now we're doing a total national sample that is looking at both urban and rural, and is looking at every single part of this country. This provides much better data. The advertising agencies now are able to plan from a much more scientific perspective, and therefore are able to target right down to specific demographics that they're looking for particular brands. So it's not a shotgun approach anymore. Now it's a much more targeted approach.
What are the average revenues like in this business? What are stations making in advertising?
Well, the gross advertising exposure for 2011 was 65 billion Kenya shillings. Giving it to radio being about 50% takes it to about 32.5 billion. The stations that are doing well are the stations that have the larger audiences and the stations that generally tend to be more national. The Kiswahili stations are doing well nationally, right? But in each region, like I mentioned earlier, the vernacular stations seem to be doing particularly well. So the 32.5 billion is, in terms of gross advertising expenditure, is actually spread across all these stations. So the more stations they are, generally the smaller the pie there is for everybody to share.
When an advertiser, or let's say their media planner, is looking to put an ad somewhere, do they gravitate naturally towards radio, or would they be thinking television, or a print ad, or maybe a huge billboard right now?
The trends are 50% in radio, about 30% television, and about 20% print. That's generally how the general trend. Now, the smaller advertiser tends to gravitate towards radio because radio is cheap to come into. Radio is cheap to flight for over a longer period of time. The larger advertisers boldly go to television and radio quite strongly, and we're seeing them in print as well.
Based on your experience tracking this industry, what do you think are the trends in future? There's the internet that's here right now, and new media is changing things, segmentation all over the place. What does Kenyan radio look like in, say, 10 years?
Kenyan radio will be, I think, a lot more segmented, right? We'll see a lot more fragmentation taking place, and we'll also start to see, should I say, newer offers coming about. And these new offers will be internet-based and mobile-based, where you can interact with your radio station and with the content, not just off a listening device or radio, but you'll also be able to interact with them on the internet and on mobile devices. It's going to open up various radio streams for the stations that are doing well and the stations that are able to keep a valuable audience that the advertising and the brands are looking for.